Hello, my name is Mohammed Bawabeid. I'm the Executive Director of the Muslim Resource Center for Social Support Integration in London, Ontario. I've been working for almost 30 years now addressing family violence in collectivist communities and trying really to come up with innovative strategies to respond to family violence in within collectivist cultural context. For many years now, I have been working as a broker between the Muslim community and Arab community, as well as anti-violence agencies in London, Ontario. And throughout this experience, I have been able to develop with a team that has been working with us at the Muslim Resource Center, a culturally integrative model to respond to family violence. And the culturally integrative family safety response model is actually about creating space for culturally based organization to be part of the solution in situations of family violence in particular. That would allow actually service providers to better understand the cultural context of families impacted by family violence within collectivist communities, but also it would allow to create a partnership with cultural communities or diverse communities to be part of the solution and not just really waiting until a situation of violence escalate and result to tragedies. So at the same time, the culturally integrated family safety response actually will train service providers to understand how they assess risk of family violence in a context of migration and culture. We're very happy that we have been working with the Arab Culture Center in Fredericton and Dr. Cathy Hotman at the University of New Brunswick to establish a new initiative that brings the Arab and Muslim community with mainstream service providers or public services to work together to address family violence in the Muslim and Arab communities. And this project actually based on the culturally integrative model, and it allows, as I said, really, it's about really raising awareness within the Arab and Muslim community on family violence issues, but also helping public services to better understand how to work with Muslim and Arab women and families impacted by domestic violence effectively and also in a culturally meaningful manner. One of the challenges that Muslim and Arab families are facing when they face family violence, the fact that they don't trust the system, mainstream or public services, because family violence is considered as a family conflict, as a private issue in many situations. Many people don't believe in professional help or support. And that would put really women in particular at risk because they are not really asking for outside help. And what we really need to consider when we work with families or in particular women impacted by domestic violence or intimate partner violence, to understand traditional roles within the family. And also really to understand that the situation that the woman would go through may be fear of losing support of the community or maybe extended family if she would go and ask for outside help. So it's really important to keep women safe, but also at the same time engage with the family. Usually you will have someone at least within the family that you can talk with, or maybe within the community. I would really recommend to identify community members who can be really supporter, an advocate on behalf of this woman, and also like a bridge between the woman who needs help as well as the service providers. At the same time, I really also recommend to slow down the process. I know if there is imminent risk, so you have to act fast, and maybe you can maybe make some kind of intrusive intervention. But I think if we slow down the process and step back a little bit, we will have enough room to maybe negotiate with different key players in the community to provide more support for the woman, but without alienating the family. That's really sometimes what would create more tension and lead to more problems, not just really for the family, but also really for the woman. So I think it's important for us to understand, what are really the lived reality, the context of the women that we are serving in these communities. For domestic violence outreach worker, here are the things that you should really consider working with Muslim women or maybe Muslim and Arab women impacted by domestic violence. One thing to consider to differentiate between the nuclear family that is existing within Western societies, comparing with the extended family, which really means a woman who is coming from Muslim or Arab background, coming from a collectivist background, which really means it's the connection with the extended family, sometimes even the family back home or part of the family back home. So before you go and approach the woman or maybe the family, you need to take into account that the context of the family structure is different. So that's something that you take into account. The second thing, you should really look also into, ask the woman, who, for example, within the extended family, that could be maybe supportive. Sometimes really very helpful to connect with someone in the family or in the extended family, but sometimes it could be risk and dangerous. But it's important to ask, and the woman will tell you what kind of support they need. Sometimes they may even connecting with someone in their country of origin as a support. I'm saying that because most of the challenges that mainstream service providers would face working with Muslim and Arab women in particular, they don't maybe appreciate their fear of losing connection with their community if they would go out, if they share their stories regarding the abuse that they're experiencing. So it's important really to understand how, what are the dilemma that they go through, and then really trying to understand where they are at and provide the support that they need, and not necessarily project what you think necessarily they need. Just one thing to really, to make sure it's really correctly understood. I'm talking now in the context of early intervention, because we have enough room when the woman is safe. Of course, as I said at the beginning, if there is imminent risk, so you need to do what you need to do to make sure that the woman is safe. The other thing that we need to take also into account, the role of men. If the men are not really representing more risk to the woman and to their children, I think it's important to engage with them and not wait until they get charged and then provide them with counseling or support. It's important to engage with them separately from the woman. That would make things much easier for the woman, but also for the family and the men. The attitudes of many Muslim and Arab families, like many other families coming from a collectivist background, towards police or law enforcement is different. Most of the time, the experience with law enforcement in many countries of origins is negative. So then, because of that, keep in mind, many women, or maybe even men or families, would be very reluctant to ask to report to the police. So I think that's something really to take, important to take into account when working with Muslim and Arab families, and maybe to start with a bridge. Like, for example, now the Arab Culture Center in Fredericton can be like a bridge between, let's say, the police and this family or this woman, as well as, of course, other mainstream mandated services, including child protection or maybe women's shelter.
Well, as we know, our project is trying to help public service providers better understand the needs of Muslim and Arab families in our community. And so, Hamdi, what do you think Muslim and Arab families need the most in terms of support when they're experiencing some form of family violence?
Yeah, when this kind of trouble occurred in a family of our community, they need to be surrounded with wise people who are well-wishing and who will try their utmost to mediate between the two parties of conflict, finding an amicably solution for the two parties, using their wisdom and their good consultation, and all this in the direction of finding peace and love reign in the family. But all this would be before the situation escalated when it will become inevitable or unavoidable to involve the authorities. So their real good role is in the early intervention before this phase. But if this phase did not work out, it is failed, the mediation did not work out, then when the authorities has to apply law, then those community-based good people would also be useful and important for the parties, because they can always provide a shelter for a woman in trouble, or a foster home for a child, or even go in hiring a lawyer for them if need be. So it is always beneficial for the parties of a conflict or a violence in a family to find such kind of wise and responsible people to be around them.
Okay, thanks. Iman, do you think that Muslim women need particular kinds of support in situations of family violence?
I think so, because you know that Muslim women's deeply, she believe to keep the family together.
Mm-hmm.
She keen about the family and the children. So when in some violence cases, the implementation of the traditional domestic violence methods, it's shocking her. Like Mr. Hamdi mentioned, they've transferred her to the house, or taking out the children, or all these kind of the procedures. Of course, this is the law, and this is for the authority to apply it. But if a community-based, person like friends, family members, if they are around, involved to keep her comfort, that will be comfort for her, and she can, deal with what she's facing. And at the same time, she needs all the men
Mm-hmm.
from the community to understand what she's going through. Yani if it is a case of violence, we will face 1, 2, 3 from the authority.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
So Abdel, we know that our community has domestic violence outreach workers, and so they go to families often. And so what do you think a domestic violence outreach worker should know about Muslim and Arab families here in Fredericton?
I believe they should know more about their life, type of life, how they live, how the culture behind this, and the other thing, which is not only the way and the religion as well. Then when they educate about all this, they can judge more fairly what's going on. So they can take this conflict with understanding of the culture behind this, because there's many other factors can translate this, reflect to accelerate to something is not intentionally done.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, when they know all this, they can judge, as I said, and they can be more fair, and they don't accelerate the situation to the level which is not acceptable, to take it to the authority or anything else.
Okay.
This is basically what it is.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
See,
And
now-
our institution, like our Arabic Culture Center now,
Mm-hmm.
is trying to teach them all the programs which allow them to use the actual words when they deal with each other in the family members.
Yes. Great, great. So Zainab, as you know, it's kind of complicated with culture and differences between, Canadian culture and Arab and Muslim cultures from which families come. And then the further complication is that most of the Arab and Muslim families in Fredericton are immigrants. So what are some of the things that an immigrant woman might worry about when she might, be telling somebody that she's experiencing family violence?
Yeah, well, the reality of it is that it does depend case by case. It depends on the relationship between the husband and the wife, and how crucial the matter is in that immigration case. So depending on whether they're waiting for a permanent residency or not, they could ask for exemption from the government on compassionate grounds, and they would be able to give it to them. But the reality of it is that if a runs out, then they're not able, if the exemption or their permanent residency, is run out, then they're not able to do that, and they might get deported because they can't. Yeah, and it depends on if the family is refugees. They should be able to. It shouldn't change the status, and they can separate.
Right. Well, sometimes an immigrant man will use deportation as a threat against his partner so that she doesn't tell anyone that there's violence in the family. So explain again, in every case, is that true, or what are a woman's options if she's in a situation of violence and she's unsure of her immigration status? What should she do?
I think for sure she needs to talk to, and that's the other big part of it, is that she needs to ask a public service provider, and there needs to be proof of the abuse. Because if there's no proof of the abuse, then that's when it might lead to deportation. But you're right, like they could use that as a threat, and that's the reality of it. But like reaching out for like a service provider, and it has to be somebody also within the community. And like Hamdi was saying, like it depends on if somebody from the community, like the woman needs to feel safe. And there has to be somebody from the community there with her to help her through that process.
Okay, and so then they could go together to talk to, say, a domestic violence outreach worker or to a shelter worker?
Exactly, yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay. So many families come from a variety of different contexts, different cultures, different countries, and in those countries they have a variety of relationships to police. And so can you talk to me a little bit about some of those differences in terms of relationships with police, Hamdi?
I think for a member of our community to talk to police, it would depend on his socio-economic status in most of the countries. It's not unified, but it differs from country to country.
Okay.
But most of people in our communities feel relaxed to talk to a police agent. Unless they are facing charges, they can always talk to police agents in a relaxed way, in a casual way, even if they're coming to report something or ask for directions in the street or ask for information or ask for protection. They can always approach a police officer in a casual manner. They don't have to be rigid, and like you see in some cases here, when you have to put your both hands on the steering wheel and stay where you are until the police officer comes to you and address you. So no, it differs. They can be less rigid than this in our communities.
But Abdel, we know that some people have had bad experiences with police. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sometimes in some countries the police is not usually fair. Sometimes it's more obsessive and aggressive, and sometimes not. But you can guarantee in our country, especially Egypt, maybe it's more aggressive. Rare to find somebody take the case and wisdomly and can be kind and so on. It always get you in a position you are blamed and something like that. So, in some other countries, the police is friendly and very nice people. They can talk to them and feel free to talk to them to explain what the situation is. And that's normally everywhere, but in some countries it's corrupted and it has bad experience. And that's what I can say about this.
Great, okay. So we know that when one of the hardest times for someone who's experiencing violence in their family is when they tell somebody else. And so, the experience itself is upsetting, but also telling somebody about it is really, really difficult. And so people are upset. And what are some ways to help comfort a victim of family violence in the Muslim and Arab family? What are some ways that you would suggest? Zainab?
So even possibly touch, but it really depends on the victim, because you don't want unwanted touch, because the person might feel traumatized again, and that's unwanted. You want to give them the control over their bodies. So asking the victim, any victim really, like asking them what they feel about being, if they wanted a hug or they wanted somebody, and especially if it's of course from the same sex. That's a big part of it too. In our culture is that if it's female, like it would be, the woman is able to offer that, but it's still important to ask even if it's of the same sex.
Okay. So, Iman, most Muslim women will not accept physical contact from a man. Why is that?
Actually, the Muslim women, she cannot accept hugs or any body contacts from the opposite sex, just for her protection.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think this is, it says in our religions.
Yes.
Yeah. Until we get married or something like that, she can accept hugs or kisses or whatever body language from her husband, from her relatives, and so it depends on the family. Even when she grown up,
Right.
they teach us that.
So it's an issue of family safety.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in some situations, police have to come to families, and we know it's a common practice for police to talk to men and women separately if there's an allegation or a suspicion that there might be violence in the family. And so would a Muslim woman be comfortable speaking alone with a police officer? Iman?
No, I don't think so, because it depends. Not I'm saying no. It depends on the lady itself,
Okay.
how she can feel by that time because of the drama or they have to explain why she has to be separate from the husband, or he has to talk to her separately. And I think it's better for her, one of the Muslim communities or the police, female police officer, to be presented. That make her feel more secure, more comfortable. She can express her, fairly and not shy. Maybe sometimes it happens in the conflict, so she cannot talk about it to the men, police officer.
Right.
Yeah.
So Zainab, say there isn't a female police officer available. What would make it comfortable for a Muslim woman to talk to a male police officer?
A big part of it would be having, I guess, somebody from the community really be there, especially if there's a language barrier. You want to be able to have somebody from the community be there, and it depends on the woman, like Iman was saying. Some women could feel comfortable talking to the police officer as long as the situation is explained. They might understand that and they might be okay with it. And if they're comfortable and ready to express themselves to the police officer, they can do that. Yeah.
So the ability to speak in their language of choice,
Yes.
that's important.
Exactly, because depending on like what they're explaining to them, whether it's like sexual abuse or violence, that's very hard to explain in a language that might be your second or third language. Having somebody from your mother tongue language and being able to explain that fully, especially if it's a trusted community member, they're going to be able to also like mentally help you with that, and emotionally,
Right.
they can help you through that process.
Okay, thank you. We want to thank all of the public service providers who submitted questions for us. These videos are a response to questions that came directly from public service providers in the Fredericton area.
And thanks for inviting us to provide all the information about our society. And if you need any further information, we would love to answer the questions. And this is our contact. You can get back to us as Arabic Culture Center Association.
The Family Safety Program is an ongoing project, and we will continue working with the service providers and with interested institutions to improve and continue this effort.
Thank
so much.
you.
Thank you.